right, the main event we've all been waiting on. And when I got to watching this, it started watching it, I realized, I said I was looking forward to the match, and then I realized this is a TV title match. Jay Lethal and Sammy Guevara. It's Jay Lethal's debut on television. My God, I didn't think they were going to switch the title, which, spoiler, they didn't. And I thought, my God, he's going to lose his debut on television. It's the first time that dawned on me. This was a great match. And everybody did come out looking better. And Jay Lethal got a nice introduction. But, Brian, taking the last 10 years out of the equation, because there's such strange things have gone on in the wrestling business the last 10 years, you can't really judge by that. But in the previous 110 years of pro wrestling, can you, off the top of your head, and you have demonstrated a savant-like ability and recall about wrestling, despite you not knowing adorable Rudy Rubalcaba, can you remember a star of any level debuting in a new promotion on television and losing their very first match?
That's a phenomenon, I believe, known as Triple H. Because we saw that with Taz in WWF, where he lost his first match as ECW champion, I think, still, to Triple H. And then we saw that with Chris Benoit when he went to the WWF right after being the WCW champion, and he immediately lost to Triple H. It was
so it's been 20 years.
Yeah, it's a WWE thing of having guys come in and immediately beating them to show who has the supremacy.
Well, they didn't do that here, though, to show anybody who was boss. What they did here was it doesn't matter who wins and who loses to them, because they just want to have a good match. And they think that that's what there is to it. So, and this was a good match from the start. And Jay did a good promo. They inserted it in the box over his entrance. They started the match with the best lockup of the night. They did a complicated series of reversals and counters and some of the old, World of Sport type of stuff with roll-ups and etc. People were chanting, "This is wrestling." Jay Lethal started working the taped ribs, and Sammy sold, but he wasn't really healing as much as just doing what he had to do, and there were dueling chants. So he's already over, Jay is, with this fan base. And at one point, Sammy, to the break, that he did the shooting star, and Lethal raised the knees. And since Sammy has his knees taped up from the pay-per-view match, etc., boom, both of them sold it big, and they went to the break. And they did a good deal during the break to kill time, obviously, because they're in a break. But the Doc Sampson, checked Sammy's ribs out. And by the time they're out of the break, Sammy's saying, I want to continue. And they jumped up, and right there come back, and they have a hockey fight. And that's where I wrote Jim Ross was into this, because he's finally got something to talk about. And then Sammy makes a comeback, but he ends up on the floor. Lethal's going for a dive. This was slick. Lethal dove through the ropes head first. Sammy's on the floor, catches him in a grip to give him an immediate brainbuster on the floor. That was pretty slick in midair. Then here's what happened. I'm going to tell you what happened, and then I'm going to say, well, why didn't this happen instead? You see which one you like better. They were fighting on the floor, and Sammy puts Lethal on a table at ringside and climbs to the top turnbuckle and does a flipping cannonball off the top rope onto Lethal, but Lethal moves, and Sammy hits the table and goes through the table to the floor off the top rope. A guy already with taped ribs that he's been selling. A guy the doctor has already checked on him. And he takes that bump. Lethal throws Sammy back in the ring, goes for his elbow drop off the top rope, and Sammy catches the elbow and rolls him up for a 2 count. They lost me. Because then Sammy was back up on his feet and landing on his feet from flips after taking that bump. So then Jay gets figure 4 and Sammy goes for the ropes. Jay pulls him back to the middle. Finally, Sammy fights and gets the rope break. the people are chanting fight forever. And I said, at this point, they might, because what else in the world are you going to do to Sammy? Back and forth, and then finally Sammy hits 2 really good-looking knee lifts. It's what I guess apparently Twinkle Toes is trying to do and just not succeeding, because these knees look like they knocked him out, and then hit his version of GTS, which is GTH. Boom, 1, 2, 3 on Jay Lethal. I was with everything in this match except that fucking cannonball off the top rope through the table. Because somebody, again, if there was anybody in charge of these matches that had not only the knowledge and the experience, but also the balls to put their foot down and say no, that would have been the place. They had an impeccable match and did that in the middle and fucked it all up in my mind, because how the fuck? What the fuck? A guy selling his injured ribs, a doctor's already checked on him, he takes that bump and gets up, and within 30 seconds in the ring, he's flipping and landing on his feet. As well as Jay Lethal, even though he looked better in this one than or did I say look better? That's a comparative statement. Even though he looked great and he came out of the match better, he still lost his debut in the new company, which is insane and unheard of before the modern age of wrestling. Let me ask you this. If you find a guy that's willing to take that bump, why can you not use that to help get the other guy over? Here's the thing. We've mentioned a bump off the top through a table by a guy who's already injured is too much. A baby face also, because Sammy's a baby face, doesn't take that bump in a match that he's winning. A baby face takes that bump in a match he's losing. Because if you find a motherfucker willing to take that bump, which, again, in all of my years in the wrestling business, if you'd have asked somebody to do that, they'd have said, fuck you. But I'm sure it was Sammy's idea and he came up with it. That's how he loses. What would it have been if he flips off the top rope, Jay Lethal moves, Sammy crashes through the table, Jay Lethal rolls back into the ring, starts getting up, the referee starts counting, and then they realize that Sammy is fucking in a fetal position, screaming. He's apparently really fucked himself up. It would be believable, because I wouldn't take that bump for $50,000 fucking dollars. So then the referee standing there is counting, and he kind of 6, 7, and somebody, Doc Sampson's run over there. Either get to the count or have the doctor wave it off. Either one. And then you've got a count out or a doctor stoppage. And then what happens? Brian, does a championship change hands on count out or doctor stoppage in AEW?
A championship, we have not seen it change hands on a count out or a doctor stoppage.
Because have we seen a title match with a count out or a doctor stoppage?
Not that I recall.
Exactly. So you got a count out or a doctor stoppage. Lethal grabs the belt. The referee may try to say, well, now, wait a minute. No, fuck you. I won. You held my hand up. See you later. Now, Lethal's got the fucking belt. Lethal technically won the match, but he did not beat Sammy Guevara. And if they do it remotely convincingly, somebody might actually buy, you know what? That wasn't the finish. Because we've seen AEW guys get knocked goofy and have to improvise. Well, shit. He really hurt himself, jammed himself up. He couldn't get back in. We're on live TV. There's what happened. Now Lethal claims he beats Sammy Guevara. Sammy Guevara says, I beat myself. You didn't even touch me. Jay Lethal has the belt. Who's going to say he can't fucking have it? There's no precedent. Is there a rule book? Maybe Tony Khan can come out and quote the rule book. Here, Rule 24-7/B says, if we ever do have a count out or a doctor stoppage, the belt doesn't change hands. Jay Lethal says, well, fine. I never heard about that. I got your belt. So fuck you. Now Sammy wants the goddamn belt back, and the only way he's going to get it back from Jay Lethal, apparently, without having to go to court, is get him back in the ring and have a finish this time. So now you have the rematch where it must be won by pinfall or submission. And now Sammy wins. And now Jay's better off, and so's Sammy. What do you think?
I think you should be a booker.
Well, I've toyed with the idea, but I've been too busy most of my life.
Sadly, going into the match, you kind of knew that Jay Lethal wasn't going to win.
Well, once I realized it was a title match, I knew that.
And knowing that, I mean, if I thought that and you thought that once you found that it was a title match, other people did too, there had to be a better way to go about it other than just having him get cleanly beaten and then do a handshake at the end, and then Jericho can stick his face in there to make sure it gets on camera and that he embraces everyone.
Would it have been shocking and gotten a lot of buzz if Jay Lethal had won that title even by that method? Would it also have gotten buzz if they were able to convince people that Sammy Guevara had been shaken up and his physical status remains unknown for a week or so until he has tests? And then it's going to take, by the time we tell this story and by the time Sammy's able to wrestle again in a few weeks and by the time that Jay Lethal's willing to play ball because now he's all convinced that he's hot shit, it'd take about 4 to 6 weeks to get a match between the two of them slotted back in. In the meantime, Jay Lethal can go out and wrestle a couple of weeks on TV where even if they don't say he's defending the TV title, he says he's defending the TV title. He puts it up on his own. The announcers say it's not sanctioned because we don't even know if he's really the champion, and that has not been cleared up yet. Possibly Tony Khan says the belt is held up pending a rematch. Title's currently vacant. Jay Lethal says, fuck you. I've got this belt, and it's around my waist, and if anybody's going to take it, they're going to have to beat me. And then he beats a couple of people before the rematch with Guevara. And boom, shakalaka, there goes the Dynamite.
It would have been better than what they did, for certain. But Jim, on the topic, before we wrap things up, one thing I wanted to ask you about, because it was a story that came out. I assume we're done talking about the match and Dynamite.
Yes, but other also just applause for Tony Khan hiring Jay Lethal. They got another piece of quality talent there, and it was a good match with that glaring exception. That's my closing thought on that before we wrap up.
Reports are that backstage in Virginia at AEW Dynamite were the Briscoe brothers.
Please, Tony, for Christmas, can we have some Briscoes and FTR? But you know what? He'd probably sign the Briscoes and put them with the Lucha Brothers too, and that would suck also. There's a common thread there.
They might mesh better with the Lucha Brothers than FTR does.
Well, that would be saying an electric chair is better than a gas chamber, but I get what you're saying. But yes, can you imagine if, again, a tag team roster, including FTR and the Briscoe brothers, would be far and away the best. And then the Lucha Brothers and the Hardy Boys could play amongst themselves. And then let's see if we can get Fish and O'Reilly back in the mix. And that we could start having some fantastic tag team matches. So yes, we want some Briscoes for Christmas, Santa Tony.